It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza, good morning.
Hello, Irwin.
You know, Esperanza, I was thinking about this literally in the 35 seconds while we were preambling before I pressed record, how in a lot of ways, yes, we're Our Hamptons podcast, but we're very often a story about an island, right? We're on Long
We're on an
Island.
island.
We're on Long Island, right? We've done a story on
Which which
shell.
is which is hold on, which is not to say that we are insular.
No, no, never. Never ever. We are not insular, but we are on Long Island. We've done a podcast on Shelter Island. We did a podcast on Robbins Island. We've touched on islands, but Esperanza, this island really may be one of the most fascinating ones of all for a lot of reasons, and I'm really excited to talk about it with you. And I'm going to give a shout out to Wendy Polhemus Annabelle, who's the head librarian of the Suffolk County Historical Society.
A
I
great
got
organization.
a great organization, and they send out really juicy emails, I think weekly, periodically, on similar to what East Hampton Library does about something of historical significance. Because Esperanza, I had never heard of Great Gull Island before. Did you?
I feel as if the only way that may have, and sort of in passing, was through Carl Safina. I mean, I feel like he must have been here.
Right.
And maybe in my reading, and I'm not recalling right now, but I feel like maybe, but no, I mean, this came as a great surprise to me when you presented it as a topic, because I didn't know this history, didn't know really anything about this island.
Well, I guess to explain to our listeners what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about Great Gull Island. I'm going to describe where it is for our audience. It is a 17-acre island, 2.5 miles east of Plum Island. So we are in Southold town of Southold on the
Right. So it's
North
right
Fork.
off the North Fork. Right.
Correct. And from what I've read, it's really off of Orient, actually. It's the far
Mm-hmm.
eastern tip.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to give a brief history before we really get into it. It was the home to Fort Michie. I guess that's how you pronounced it. It was a coastal fort named after a Lieutenant Dennis Michie of the 7th U.S. Infantry, U.S. Army.
And this was 19th century. It began
That
in 1886.
exactly, and it began as a 30-man post back then. But by the start of World War One, there were actually 135 soldiers stationed there. Talk about isolated. My
No,
God.
totally. I mean, when you see images of this place, and it is, it's like a remote island, but it's right there, like smack in the middle. Long Island Sound, Block Island Sound, like you could see Connecticut, you could see the North Fork, you could see Montauk, you could
Right.
see Block Island. I mean, on a good day, right?
Exactly. Really a very apt description and really remote, very small, obviously at this kind of size. You know, if we push it beyond World War One and we go into 1949, the federal government owned it at this point. They were about to auction off Great Gull Island to the highest bidder. And there were some other people interested in it. There was a hospital in New Jersey, the Bound Brook Hospital, which had planned to use the island for a cancer research center. But that didn't come to be because ultimately the government awarded the island, which means they gave it to the American Museum of Natural History. And it's a funny thing, Esperanza, right? It was called Great Gull Island because while it had long been a breeding ground for terns, and we're going to get into that in a minute, they thought the terns were gulls.
Right. I mean, most people everybody calls them seagulls, but
Right.
and
That's right.
then you've got the distinction between what is a gull, what is a tern, and all this. Yeah, I'm not the one who's well versed on this, but yes,
Yeah,
this
I
is a
will tell
difference.
you in all candor, I am not sure if you gave me a quiz, could I tell the difference between a gull and a tern? I don't know. Probably not if these people couldn't, but may who knows?
Well, the tern is well, we'll get into it, but the tern is actually it's more like a swallow. It's
Right,
like it's not that it's smaller, but it's got different sort of a different configuration. The way it flies, it kind of swoops around like a swallow, right? And
right.
but the distinctiveness is this little black like skull cap that it has, and there's the common tern, and then there's the roseate tern, which are both, well, the roseate is endangered and the common is threatened in New York State. So this is a really important, strategic as it was during war times as a fort, it now has the significance of really being central to environmental protection.
Couldn't agree with you more. And apparently, Esperanza, the tern population was decimated, and it was decimated really by hunters who
Right.
were
Yeah. It
seeking
wasn't the
the,
military.
yeah, yeah, exactly, seeking these birds because apparently during this era, whenever we're talking about the middle of the 20th century, they were using the feathers of these birds to put on women's hats.
Yeah, really, I think more 19th century. This was
Right.
like the decimation of bird populations came because women, and I guess even men, these feathers were used on so many different articles of clothing and hats in particular.
Yes, thank you for that correction. You're right. It is more there, but it might have continued into the 20th century. But anyway, that's how these birds started to plummet. And, again, the remoteness of this place, a small island off the coast of Orient Point, it almost saved the Tern colony. They seem to have been spared a little bit because of how remote it is. So what happened was they wanted to reestablish, I guess, a nest of terns on the island, right? And
Right.
to your point that this is an important bird, they wanted to do studies of this bird to determine their rate of increase, if you put it in a favorable environment. And this was an interesting point I read also, Esperanza, how it might be a boon to fishermen in the waters. And you implied this, the way they're smaller, the way they fly, and they would feed on the small fish driven to the surface by the mackerel. They would call the mackerel spotter, right? So
Yes.
it
Yeah.
was
So
sort
it would
of,
help the fishermen.
and fishing being a big industry on Eastern Long Island, particularly in this era, there was some benefit to it. So it's really an incredible story. And there was also apparently a Linnean society, I think a Swedish society that was also involved in this on Great Gull Island. And we're getting this. This is really going back to a 1949 article, believe it or not, in the New York Times. If we move it a little bit closer into present day, we're going to go to a article from the Times in 93. And this is where, Esperanza, we should introduce Helen Hays because she was the director. I mean, you want to talk about her life's work? This was her
Oh,
life.
this was definitely, this consumed her. And let's make the distinction. This was Helen Hays, not the actor. Helen Hays, like the Helen Hays Theater. No, not that person. This was a Helen Hays with no E in the Hays.
Exactly.
H
Despite
A
the
Y
fact that,
S.
as you pointed out, there were E's periodically in our research, however.
Yes, the inconsistent spelling. So even I was confused when you first mentioned it, like, oh, the association with Helen
Right.
Hays. And I'm thinking, the actor? Like, what? No. So this Helen Hays, who came from Johnstown near Albany, New
Correct.
York, had been with the Museum of Natural History, and they had already taken this over in 1949, as you pointed out. But then by the mid 60s, she made her first excursion to the Gull Island.
Yeah, and literally worked there almost till the end of her life, which we'll get to in a minute. Reading this on, again, two organizations, the American Museum of Natural History and and I'm probably destroying this word, the
It's
Linnaean,
Linnaean. Yeah.
Linnaean Society. Thank you for that. Bird Watchers Group, followed by Swedish naturalist, Carl Linnaeus. He had a method of
Linnaeus, yeah.
Linnaeus. She's good, ladies and gentlemen, isn't she? She's just corrects me subtly. I so appreciate you. Gosh, oh my gosh. But it was really,
Well, who knows how it is really pronounced in Swedish, but that's how
eh,
I've
eh,
heard it said.
or I have a feeling your Swedish is probably better than mine, so I'm going with yours.
Hardly.
So in 93, this article is reporting how more and more terns were returning from South America. That's where they apparently spend the winter, and choosing to breed on Great Gull Island. The peak, more than 10,000 terns can descend on the island. Some have nicknamed Great Guano, right?
Yes, it's clearly like when I started envisioning all these birds on this one island, I couldn't help but my mind turned to the vast amount of excrement that must be
And
on this
and
place.
we will bring that out because as we get into the story of the volunteers, I mean, it was literally raining bird droppings here.
No
I mean,
doubt. No doubt.
literally raining it. And we've all heard these stories when we're in New York or whatever, and a pigeon does what it does and it gets on the
Yeah, it's
shoulder
good
of your
luck.
sweater, right? You're like freaking out about it. And meanwhile, these people did this
Oh no,
research.
yeah. These volunteers, they don the special shirts so that their clothes is covered. It's so funny. But if you think of, and I just recently rewatched this film, think of Hitchcock's The Birds.
Right.
That is what we're talking about.
Multiplied. The
Yeah,
bird squared.
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. It's also what's I think is an interesting part of the story is almost also the progression of this place, which we touched on earlier. It went from a fort to literally this sanctuary, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Now,
I mean, we have to really think about it. What you just said reminded me. Yes, it was a fort at its height. It had nearly 500 military personnel barracked there, stationed there between World War I, World War II. And then, I mean, they had built fortifications. This
that's right.
island was fortified. There are massive structures. They basically paved it over. So from 1949 on, it was sort of a recovery of not the natural state of the island, because I think that could not really be reversed, but certainly nature tends to do its thing and takes over anyway. I understand that there they were trying to, okay, let's rake some sand over this area to cushion the place
Right.
because really it had become just a big concrete jungle.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's an important point to bring out, just the really the trajectory of this place. So it goes on to say, and again, we remember this article is 93, so it's about 32 years ago, 33 years ago. For the 6 weeks of nesting, now more than 30 college students, so we're talking about the summertime now. For these 6 weeks, 30 college students are hired to mark eggs, put bands on the birds, keep records. The students are paid $900 for this 6 weeks. Helen Hays tells the story how she takes all kinds. It's English majors, students who are trying, as she puts it here, this was a common term in the 90s, trying to find themselves, right? Not sure what they want to do. They work very hard. Now, the budget for the island at the time, $55,000. 5,000 contributed by the museum, 3,000 by the Linnean Society, 12 to $20,000 by the society's spring birdathon in Central Park, the rest from random contributions. But Esperanza, this is the point I really like to bring up here. Talking about in concept, right? Wow, this sounds very sort of romantic and
Oh
oh,
gosh, yeah, no.
well,
I was trying to put myself in this place, and if you prepare yourself mentally, I think I can't help but think, yes, there's no running water on this island.
right. That's
There's no electricity on this island.
that's and Exactly. And Esperanza, we always talk how we like to transport our audience to a place, right? And this is somewhat of current history. We're only talking 30 years ago, but
But the military barracks go back to the turn of the century.
right, 1990s. Let's just say there was no Airbnb on Great Gull Island, okay? The accommodations on this island, they're using the word primitive. So the volunteers, and we'll get into the kind of people who volunteered beyond students. The volunteers put sleeping bags on top of mattresses in these brick and concrete barracks, which date back, to your point, to when I guess the army was there, right? The rooms are filled to the ceiling with wire cages big enough for a dog, stools for sitting in the blinds to watch the birds spill out of the closet. The meals in the former officials' barracks, noisy, communal. Esperanza, we had to draw the shades at night, so the candlelight, there's no electricity.
Candlelight does not
Yeah, you're
disturb the
reading.
birds.
Yeah,
Candlelight.
yeah. This isn't romantic. Oh, let's
This
have
is
wine over a
this is
candlelight dinner here.
yeah, they're more than dark sky compliant here.
That's yes. The shades are down, candlelight because there's no electricity, drinking water brought to the island each week. Okay. Small generator to power a little refrigerator. Uh, you know, these stories.
It's awesome. And the thing is there is, or when I mentioned to you and I'll mention to our listeners, there is actually a documentary about this. It's called Full Circle, and it really is worth watching just to see these people in action, and it does have footage from really early days as well. There were people that would go out, and you said we're going to talk about it. We'll go into this in a moment about the types of volunteers, and some of them really do. They just volunteer. I mean, I think not everybody is paid $900 because, from what I understand, there would be people who would just, oh, a friend of mine goes there every year. No, I have nothing better to do. Maybe I'll go for a weekend. And then they'd go for the weekend, and they would end up staying the entire summer. And Helen, mind you, would be out there, and maybe, probably other people, but initially it was really just her, from April, this is
That's
not the
right.
summer, April to September.
Yeah. And Esperanza, remember, you brought out no running water. These people were bathing with rainwater, literally.
Right. Right.
Okay? They
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
bathing with rainwater. They had to drink bottled water. This was primitive, like you can't imagine. And we should touch on some of these people. And I'm just going to go into it because, and I think this is what I think you were going for. It was really a diverse group of people. The
Yeah.
students were paid, but for everyone else, it was a volunteer. There was a Maggie Zadorsny, Whitestone Queens biologist with the Park Service. And she described it. It was an intense labor of love. I use these terms because everyone out here cares about the birds. We want them to succeed. Matter of fact, there were such bad flyers. I like this quote. The baby terns are called Orvilles,
I
right?
know. I love this.
That was
Yeah.
really,
Oh, after Orville, right? Oh my gosh. Little flyers. Yeah. Poor little birds. They're so sweet. Oh. But I actually should mention, yes, Maggie Zadorozny, who you were just quoting, but in the movie also there was a man who said, "Well, this fits perfectly in my schedule as a bus driver." So, man was a bus driver between September and June, and then would go out to Great Gull Island and volunteer, I suppose, through the summer doing this work. I think it's marvelous. And I've got to say, it does sound kind of romantic and uh, I don't know, an experience that you probably would be captivated by because it's so focused and the communal aspect of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree until it came time to bathe in the rainwater.
Oh, come on. That's the best water to bathe in.
Well, to your point, I mean, all of these volunteers were senior citizens. There were a family, a person in finance who was a financial analyst brought his 9-year-old and 6-year-old along with his
Oh
wife, who
yeah,
was a
all ages, exactly.
a psychology professor at Columbia. I mean, the diversity of these volunteers, you want to talk about checking out
Yeah,
of
yeah, for sure. And not all of them, I mean, really, a good portion of them, not experts. They're not all ornithologists. They're not biologists like the woman we just were speaking about. These were people that, yeah, it was just an escape for them. I think it's marvelous.
exactly. And she goes on to say, I mean, and to your point, how this Helen Hayes was there for 6 months a year, and literally, I think for 50 years, there are no escapes to the mainland, right? Hurricanes, big northeasters, they're weathered and treasured as opportunities to see rare birds blown in.
Right. Yeah, yeah. What's going to come in? Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
just really, and
Yeah, because that ferry from Mystic isn't coming anytime soon to get you out.
no, no, definitely not. And I don't want to keep harping on this, but I just really can't get over it because to talk about between the bathing in the rainwater, you're isolated beyond belief. You can't get to the mainland storms, but the dive bombing birds themselves, beyond just the droppings, apparently they also were pecking you, like, right? They were,
Yes, and this is something that is mentioned in these articles, but you also see it in the film because I was watching it and thinking, gee, what is up with these hats with flowers sticking out of the
right,
crown? Like, what is that, right? Well, it turns out, and this must have been Ms. Hayes, who devised this trick, although apparently she didn't really use it, where they're going to peck at the flowers instead of the crown of the hat. So you're protected, in other
right,
words.
right. So these volunteers, okay, Ms. Hayes, she's the captain of this ship. This is her life's work. Okay. But all of these people from all of these diverse backgrounds, children, seniors, I mean, they were ages from 6 to senior citizens going here, right? And then educators, what have you. They're working in this environment, bathing in rainwater, one refrigerator powered by a generator, bottled water only, eating by candlelight, but then blowing the candles out and then basically staying in darkness not to disturb the birds. And then when they're working for the birds, they're wearing these big hats to what you were just
Yeah,
bringing
yeah,
up
yeah.
with these fake flowers. So they peck the fake flowers and not you.
Yes.
And
And we forgot also, yes, as I mentioned earlier, you wear just like an old shirt on top of your clothes so that all the droppings don't get all
and
over you.
But Helen Hayes, she was fine with this. She was wearing no hat, sun-washed pink shirt and pants, ornamented, as the writer describes in this article, with bird droppings, yet somehow look perfectly normal. Transport
Yeah.
yourself to a place. This is just,
It is. It's quite the little society. One of the things that also is worth mentioning is that early on, I think when Helen Hayes was beginning her work there, there had been a lot of overgrowth on the island, and apparently the terns don't like that to use for nesting, and so they reintroduced a meadow vole. So now, on top of all the birds that you have on the island, you are constantly accompanied by little voles scurrying about everywhere. But they did the job, as they do in my own garden, devouring the plants that were basically invading the surface.
such a great point. And voles, you've
Oh,
had them
they're
in
my
you.
enemy.
Oh, they are my enemy too. I mean, a vole basically looks like a mouse without a tail. That's what
It's
it looks
super
like.
cute. They're super.
But Esperanza, they have literally taken down an olive tree in my backyard. I mean, this little tiny thing that weighs a couple of ounces.
Oh yeah, no, it's like an alien abduction of your plants. It
Ex-
really
e-
is.
Exactly. And we're going to start to close this episode out. We're talking about Ms. Hayes. So her schedule, we got into what the volunteers, the students, everyone did. Ms. Hayes was the last person off of the island. She would, when
Yeah,
the
the first one and the last one,
first
right?
one on, last one off. You said it, I think, perfectly accurately. I would say we're going to call this season April to September. She would leave in September when the last of the terns would head south. She would go back to Manhattan. She lived on East 85th Street, and she'd spend the winter analyzing the data, writing research papers in the museum's ornithology department, and visit the South American coast where the terns spend the non-breeding season. So not only the 6 months a year was she there working this island, there was her off season
Yeah.
was in South America where they were, and in New York, analyzing and writing all of these papers, pre-chat GPT, I might add. She had to do the work. And just just extraordinary, Esperanza. And as we're beginning to close this story off, because in a sense, it almost speaks to is a chapter of Great Gull Island closing. Helen Hays just passed away the beginning of 2025, and she was 94 years old. And, I read her obituary, and it talked about all the things we talked about, how there was no running water or reliable electricity. Ms. Hayes began these annual trips in 1969 and spent a full 5 months there every year. Only COVID stopped her, not the droppings, in 2020. What a legacy when you
Yeah.
think about it. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because as you were talking, I'm thinking there's a quote here because she really was ageless. Not that she wasn't aware of her age and her diminishing flexibility, agility, strength, but she said about her age, my grandmother died at 101, and she never gave her age until she was 100. So that's what I'm going to do too. So the
yes,
fact that we're saying, oh yeah, she was 94 it's irrelevant. She was without age.
100%. And thinking about this, and I now put down every little note, every little highlight I have, just a retrospect in my own head as we wrap this up, Esperanza, about Helen Hays. She didn't have a family, never married, never had children. Her entire life was really devoted to this island, to these birds, and it's a most unusual legacy,
Mm,
but a fascinating one.
legendary.
And valuable, right?
Oh, so valuable. I mean, they give all of the numbers of how the populations increased. And I just find it fascinating to think that so often we're looking at birds in our backyards, on our coasts here on Long Island, that have traveled such immense distances, whether it's to South America, as with the terns here, or there are the Arctic terns that go all the way. I mean, they're coming from, it's just incredible. The lack of boundaries.
I like that. I'm going to change that. I love that. The lack of boundaries, sort of like how we carry on our Hamptons podcast, the lack
We
of
have no
boundaries.
boundaries.
We have no boundaries, but neither did Helen Hayes. And
He didn't. True.
it makes me wonder what the future of Great Gull Island is now without
Truly.
her. I can't say that she's irreplaceable. We're all replaceable, I guess, but boy, she may be pretty close to irreplaceable. And it's an interesting
Yeah,
thing to
well,
explore.
definitely. Yeah, nobody like her, but certainly, and they say so in this article, she was an inspiring person. So I am hopeful that there is a succession and this project continues through the Museum of Natural History, which is it's vital. It's so vital. It makes me want to go and even just look at this from afar, from
Yeah.
a yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up that documentary. And when this episode airs, we'll post it on Instagram. We'll make mention of it. But really, Esperanza, thank you. This was really a fascinating journey. Definitely an off radar story in a podcast of 100+ episodes that prides ourselves on off radar.
This is definitely on the higher part of the list, off Radar Island.
True. And again, thank you for to the Suffolk County Historical Society for really putting this story out there, making us aware of it. Really interesting stuff. And Esperanza, thank you so much for today. And as always, a pleasure.
Yes, Irwin, thank you. Until next time.
Until next time. Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.